Story 1. The USS Cyclops was a Navy collier, a coal carrier, that disappeared in March of 1918. The loss is often described as the largest Navy ship to go missing, and no trace or wreckage of it has ever been found. The vanishing is often linked to the Bermuda Triangle, where it disappeared, as evidence of something sinister or supernatural in that area of the Atlantic. While the exact fate of the ship remains unknown, research reveals several clues that can explain what likely happened. The Cyclops was designed to carry coal but was carrying manganese or when it was lost. Manganese is heavier and denser than coal, so the holds would not have been completely filled, allowing room for the load to shift and unbalance the ship. There were also concerns that the Cyclops was overloaded. Another issue with manganese ore is that it tended to react with the steel beams of or carriers, corroding them and weakening the hull. Evidence of this was seen on the ore carrier USS Jason, and another, the Chucky, was so damaged from this that it broke in two while in calm weather. Weather reports indicated that the Cyclops may have encountered a storm with 30 to 40 knot winds. In storms producing large waves, a ship's hull can buckle or even break if the two ends are caught on the crests of waves. In addition, 3 of the 4 Proteus-class ships disappeared at sea. Cyclops and 2 sister ships. The 4th was sunk by Japanese aircraft during World War II. This clearly indicates flaws or problems with the ships. Putting it all together, it is not hard to conclude what probably happened. The ship had a flawed design and weakened hull and was carrying a heavy and unstable load. It ran into a storm and likely either capsized or broke apart and sank. Story 2. Elisa Lamb. She climbed up from a side door, opened the water tank, and drowned. She had a history of mental health issues and was clearly having an episode. The tank was found open by staff, not closed. It was not paranormal or a murder. She died in a tragic accident during a mental health crisis. Story 3. The Bermuda Triangle. If you take the same square mileage of ocean and measure it out elsewhere in the world, near similar ports and human settlements, you will have the same level of disappearances and unusual occurrences. Story 4. Archimedes' Death Ray. Mythbusters dedicated at least 2 episodes to it, which was entertaining, but the Our Fake History podcast offers the most solid perspective in my honest opinion. The first mention of this alleged device appears long after everyone who witnessed the Battle of Syracuse had died, over 100 years after the battle. The idea that it was a sun-focusing device comes even later. There is no credible evidence that such a device was used at the battle. The real significance is that there is credible evidence Archimedes deployed an impressive device at the Battle of Syracuse. Sailors who survived the battle described a giant claw that lifted boats by one end and dropped them to shatter and sink. The claw of Archimedes appears to have been a real invention, possibly a type of weaponized cargo crane with a grapple. Story 5. The lost colony of Roanoke failed for reasons that are well documented and not mysterious. They sent their governor back to England for badly needed supplies. The colonists told Governor White that if they were forced to abandon the settlement, they would leave him a note saying where they had gone, which would probably be with their Croatan allies. When White returned several years later, he found the word Croatan carved into a tree. Modern sources refer to this carving as mysterious or cryptic, but contemporary sources say White was absolutely certain his people were alive and well with the Croatan, since there was no sign of conflict and they had had time to dig up the hidden supply caches before leaving. The Croatan also started having light-skinned, blue-eyed children in the decades afterward. Before White could confirm this, the ship's anchor snapped, and they were forced to recall the landing party and return to England, leaving room for later writers to embellish and mythologize events that were not considered mysterious at the time. The so-called Battle for Los Angeles. 2 months after Pearl Harbor, the temporarily embarrassed and permanently paranoid United States military opened fire on an object described as a balloon. Then they acted obstructive and secretive about it because of wartime and they did not want to admit that they had discharged munitions over an urban area trying to shoot down their own weather balloon. Stendek in Morse code uses the same dot and dash sequence as SCTI-AR. SCTI is Santiago Airport, and AR means over. Stardust's mysterious last transmission before the crash was routine traffic advising air traffic control of their destination. Story 6. Spontaneous human combustion peaked at the collision of 2 trends. smoking and cheap, highly flammable furniture. One would think that if it were a legitimate phenomenon, the ubiquity of smartphones and home surveillance would have eventually recorded one. But no, there is always a proximate cause. I thought for a minute that the occasional pants fire from bad vaping devices would cause a resurgence in spontaneous human combustion rumors, but the videos make it extremely obvious what happened. Story 7. Jack the Ripper was likely just a random local deviant who knew how to blend in and not draw any attention to himself during the murders. He probably has never even been named as a suspect. He was not a member of the royal family, part of a Freemason conspiracy, or H. Holmes. Story 8. Amelia Earhart. They found her shoe, her makeup compact, the windshield from her plane, and a jar of freckle cream she always carried on a place called Nakamaroro Island. Her last distress call came from near that island. They found bones that matched hers, for goodness sake, just 3 years after the crash. This mystery has been solved repeatedly, and yet recently there was a news story about sending another team to see if they can solve the mystery. Story 9. Aaron Hedges was an elk hunter who behaved unusually and wandered off in the crazy mountains. His body was found the following year, as documented in Missing 411. An important detail often omitted is that he had suddenly stopped a severe alcohol addiction. He experienced intense withdrawal symptoms. It is possible he was experimenting with disulfiram or another anti-addiction medication to help him stop drinking. A hunter experiencing severe alcohol withdrawal is not particularly mysterious. Story 10. Dyatlov Pass Incident 1959. 9 Russian hikers were found dead with unusual injuries in the Ural Mountains, including missing eyes and tongues, massive internal trauma, and no clear signs of struggle. Theories included unidentified flying objects, mythical creatures, and Soviet weapons. In 2021, researchers concluded that a delayed slab avalanche caused the incident. Snow pressure and hypothermia led to panic and trauma, and animal scavenging accounted for the missing soft tissue. Story 11. Michael Rockefeller drowned. He did not assimilate into a tribe of native Papuans, nor were they responsible for his disappearance. He was last seen by 2 of his local guides attempting to swim to shore to get help after the boat they were in overturned. They were 2 miles from land in a shark-infested tidal estuary with strong currents and choppy conditions. Rockefeller, though a decent swimmer, almost certainly succumbed to cramps and exhaustion before reaching land. Ironically, the 2 other men were eventually able to right the boat and row to shore relatively unharmed. They immediately searched for Rockefeller but found nothing. Story 12. Why the pyramids are mathematically so perfect. From aliens to gods, everything is more famous than their use of wheels and circles in their measurements. Story 13. The men on Franklin's expedition most definitely cannibalized each other. Carving and cutting marks, long survival, and immense hunger, along with eyewitness accounts by Inuit who were in contact and traded with the stranded men, support this. The British would not believe it, but it most definitely happened. Story 14. In Australia, Harold Holt drowned. His body was never recovered. He is not the only person to whom this has happened. Story 15. I am pretty convinced that Maura Murray was drinking, got into a car accident, ran into the woods, and eventually died of exposure. Story 16. The Somerton Man, also known as Tamam Shud, has been identified as most likely being Carl Webb. He took his own life after losing several close family members and going through a divorce. He had a history of suicide attempts and mental health issues. He was never involved in espionage. The codes found on him are believed to be shorthand for horse races, as he enjoyed betting on horses. Story 17. Most mysterious instances of people suddenly doing something completely out of character and then vanishing are not supernatural and are not murders. There are several severe mental illnesses that suddenly start in early adulthood and include severe psychosis. A sudden psychotic episode that ends in either suicide or people wandering off and succumbing to the elements is extremely plausible and sadly not uncommon. Story 18. My grandmother was losing her vision because of glaucoma. This was 2 decades ago. She began to see ghosts, especially seeing my grandfather very clearly, who had been dead for years, lying in bed with her. She was not a person inclined to believe in the paranormal and told us and her doctor what was happening. It turned out that her brain was struggling to accommodate the sudden vision loss. It tried to make sense of the fuzzy images, shadows, and blurry forms she was seeing by searching her memory for an image that fit the context, found one, and presented it to her. In short, her brain was seeing the vague shapes of untidy sheets and cushions on her bed, did not recognize them because she was almost blind, and substituted the memory of her dead husband instead. That makes a great deal of sense. I believe it explains the majority of ghost stories. Story 19. The Min Min lights are mysterious lights seen in remote outback Australia. Theories and explanations vary widely. It is a well-known phenomenon that occurs in desert areas, including cold ones, around the world and is usually caused by vehicle headlights over or on the horizon. Story 20. I think the most plausible explanation for the Sodder children's disappearance is that they died and burned in the fire. The idea that they somehow survived, grew up, and never reached out to anyone feels like nonsense to me. Story 21. Bumblebees. Science does not know how they fly, or, according to scientists, they should not be able to fly. They use pretty much the same principles as helicopters. It was not groundbreaking to learn that, so it did not receive much media attention. Story 22. The philosopher Plato entirely invented Atlantis to be the antagonists in his unfinished follow-up to his Republic, known as the Critias. The Republic describes Plato's ideal city-state. The sequel was intended to demonstrate how such a state should conduct itself in war against its opposite, Persia, or rather, Atlantis. Athens had just finished a major war with Persia. The problem is that it is easy to miss that Atlantis is supposed to be a very bad place, because Plato was a traditionalist critical of democracy, foreign interactions including trade and imperialism, and any kind of innovation. He also thought large building projects were disrespectful to the gods, and considered personal or architectural decoration to be excessive. The result is that his description of this gorgeous, cosmopolitan city, with extravagant imaginary architecture and engineering, comes off as impressive. Story 23. Anastasia Romanoff was murdered along with her family. Her body was missing. They dumped Alexei and Maria's bodies in a different location, hoping they would remain unidentified and therefore, if found, the Romanoffs would not receive a royal burial. Story 24. The Yuba County Five became disoriented, got lost, and made a series of poor decisions that led to their eventual deaths from starvation, exposure, or animal attack. All of these men were adults with special needs, except for one who had several significant mental health diagnoses. Just because the decisions they made seem unwise in hindsight does not mean there was a conspiracy. Story 25. Crop circles. People have open competitions for crop art now. Most hauntings are caused by rats. They bang their backs on the underside of floorboards, and people mistake it for footsteps. They scrape and knock against walls. They start fires by chewing cables. They release foul smells, move stuff around, take items from one room to another days later, knock objects from shelves, activate buzzers and bells, watch you so you sense their presence, upset other animals that react to something you cannot see, push out drawers, squeal like cats or babies, and so on. They can get through extremely small holes and remain hidden exceptionally well, even if there are dozens of them. Story 26. Where did the treat go? My dog will attest she simply could not have just eaten it. It must be around here somewhere. Story 27. How my cat nearly starves to death every single day because he has not been fed in 20 minutes. It turns out he just does not understand the concept of time. Story 28. Flannan Isles Lighthouse. The lighthouse keepers were taken out by a rogue wave while trying to secure equipment outside. All the spooky stories about diary entries and other details were added years later. Reports at the time treated it as a simple tragedy, not a mystery. Story 29. Roswell was actually a specialized weather balloon designed to detect nuclear tests. The United States covered it up because they did not want the Soviet Union to know they were listening. Story 30. Not sure how many people would legitimately consider this unsolved, but it is more than zero. O.J. Simpson killed Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. The Los Angeles Police Department mishandled the investigation and provided the prosecutors with a weak case, which they did a poor job presenting to a jury whose sole intent was to try and convict the police department for reasons unrelated to the case. There are multiple reasons why there was never going to be a conviction, none of which changed the fact that he committed the crime. Story 31. The bloop was glacial ice calving, not the call of an undiscovered abyssal leviathan. The Dyatlov Pass incident was most likely an avalanche, not extraterrestrial beings. The most boring explanation always wins. Story 32. People in Ireland who claim to have heard the wail of a banshee probably heard foxes. Story 33. In Australia, the Mahogany Ship is one of the shipwrecks on the shipwreck coast. There is an early newspaper account of it being broken up for scrap, which provides the total mass of copper rivets recovered. It was not made of mahogany. The last expedition to find the Mahogany Ship just a few years ago found the broken auger from a previous expedition to locate the Mahogany Ship. Story 34. Diane Schuler is not a well-known case, but I discovered it when I came across people discussing theories about why it happened. She was a woman who drove her car full of children into oncoming traffic, killing everyone except her son. Afterward, tests showed she was positive for alcohol and marijuana. There was also a bottle of liquor in the passenger console. Reports say she stopped at McDonald's a couple of hours earlier to get orange juice, which some believe was to mix with the liquor. Theories try to explain why she drank or why the toxicology report was wrong. People said she was not a heavy drinker or smoker, though they later admitted she did smoke sometimes. She was described as a responsible, highly paid executive who loved her children and would never do such a thing. Those who believe she drove under the influence suggest she had a bad tooth. As someone with an alcoholic mother who frequently drove drunk with us in the car, others often did not notice. My mother was only arrested once when she became too disorderly at a baseball game. Diane, by all accounts, was less disorderly. She was able to hide it. She thought she could handle it. When her nieces called their parents during the drive, crying and saying something was wrong with Aunt Diane, she took the phone and said everything was fine. She didn't want to get caught or admit she was drunk driving with the children. Even though she stopped on the highway to vomit and was clearly unable to drive, she got back in the car and accidentally entered the highway going the wrong way. This was not due to a medical emergency or confusion, but because she was very drunk and high. Story 35. King Tut's curse was caused by a fungus. Researchers have found that this fungus, which may have contributed to the ancient curse, shows promise in treating cancer. Story 36. Chris Kremers and Liz and Froon, the two Dutch girls who went missing while hiking in a Panamanian jungle, definitely died by exposure. Story 37. Area 51 unidentified flying object sightings. Bug-eyed, green extraterrestrials in spacecraft? Or close proximity to United States Air Force Base flight testing unusual airframe or drone designs? Story 38. The World Trade Center towers collapsed because they were hit by planes carrying jet fuel. The strength of steel decreases at high temperatures. Story 39. Princess Diana's death was really an accident, but I still know people who insist that she was killed on purpose because she was pregnant. Her ex told journalists that she was consistent with her birth control. There is proof that the driver was drunk. King Charles may have been a bad husband to her, but she is still the mother of his children, one of whom is the future King of England. Even if he hated her, he would have nothing to gain by killing her. He had already dealt with the Camilla controversy and the public divorce. Why do that as well? Story 40. Santa isn't real. The gifts are from your parents. It is physically impossible for two regular adults to deliver gifts to every child in the world in one night. Their cars do not go fast enough. It would only be possible for an immortal jolly old man with a magic flying reindeer-drawn sleigh. Story 41. Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 was purposefully crashed by the pilot. He is not the first pilot to do this. The wreckage was found in the Indian Ocean. The pilot had a home flight simulator where he practiced the route. I do not know why people find this so mysterious. Story 42. The There's Your Problem podcast recently released a good episode on the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle. It explained that it is no more dangerous than any other major busy shipping lane. In fact, the mystery began during the early era of air travel. That area of the East Coast has many military bases, so many training exercises occurred there. Predictably, several training exercises went missing due to pilot errors and crashes. Sensationalist headline writers exaggerated the story, making it seem like the area had always been dangerous for shipping. This is not true, as half of the mysterious disappearances and sinkings did not even occur within the triangle. However, facts often get ignored in favor of popular ghost stories. One theory involves a training flight where the crew became disoriented. They believed they were in the Gulf of Mexico and tried to fly north to land. In reality, they were over the Atlantic Ocean. The lead pilot's compass was malfunctioning, and instead of relying on a trainee with a working compass, he tried to navigate by the sun. This caused them to fly north off the coast over the ocean until they ran out of fuel and crashed. Story 43. I think it is not a mystery that Diane Schuler was an alcoholic who caused the Taconic Parkway crash. This was not a one-time drinking event. Why is her husband fighting so hard to say there is no way and that he did not know? Liability. He knew she was still drunk or drinking and let the nieces go with her. If he admits that, he could face negligence and endangerment charges and be sued civilly by the parents of the nieces, and would likely lose. He is holding on to plausible deniability because he refuses to admit he largely contributed to the incident and should be held accountable. Story 44. It is all circumstantial, but the evidence clearly points to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 being a premeditated pilot murder-suicide. There is no other theory that fits all the available facts. Story 45. Ouija boards. You are literally moving the object. The same applies to pendulums. This is called the ideomotor response. The ideomotor phenomenon refers to the influence of thoughts and expectations on involuntary physical movements. It describes how the subconscious mind can trigger subtle movements, often amplified by external factors, leading to seemingly spontaneous actions. This concept is relevant to understanding phenomena like dowsing, Ouija boards, and certain hypnotic responses. Story 46. The kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh, also known as the Lindbergh baby. Many people still think he is missing. He was murdered and found 11 days after the kidnapping. A perpetrator was found, tried, and sentenced. Story 47. Oh, I have a list, but the main ones that bother me are Bermuda Triangle. No extraterrestrials or conspiracies, just user error, hurricanes, and atmospheric phenomena. Egyptian pyramids. Once again, no extraterrestrials. Experts have several ideas about how they were built, and we may never know for sure, but we do know for certain that the Egyptians built the pyramids themselves. They had skilled artisans doing the work, a huge workforce, and there is abundant evidence proving it. Roanoke. When John White left the colony to return to England, the settlers agreed that if they moved away from that spot, they would carve on a tree where they had moved to. When John White returned, the word Croton was carved into a tree. White did not consider it a mystery and even tried to go to Croton but was unable to do so. These days, archaeologists frequently find European pottery and artifacts on Croton. It was never a mystery to begin with. Story 48. Chemtrails and legislation about chemtrails. Story 49. Lee Harvey Oswald had a major documented conflict with Governor Connolly, whom he blamed for not reversing Oswald's dishonorable military discharge. Marina, Oswald's wife, testified to this. In other words, Oswald was not trying to kill President John F. Kennedy. He was trying to kill Governor Connolly and hit Kennedy by mistake. Part of the issue is that in 1963, Oswald's actions did not make sense. Oswald makes more sense in the present day. A disgruntled, maladjusted, misanthropic white man decides to pick up a gun and shoot people because his life did not work out the way he wanted. Given what we have seen with mass shooters in the last few decades, what sounds more plausible? A vast, elaborate conspiracy between the Central Intelligence Agency and organized crime involving multiple gunmen, or a troubled loner, angry about his own failures, who takes up a gun and accidentally hits the wrong person. Story 50. B. Cooper. Either a completely inexperienced or lightly trained man parachuted into harsh wilderness in the dead of night, and it is somehow a mystery that nobody ever heard from him again. The man died, either on impact or in the wilderness after landing. At least that seems the most likely solution to me. Story 51. Crop circles in cornfields. The people who created them admitted to it. There is even footage available of them making the crop circles. However, the movie Signs was still made. Story 52. Amelia Earhart was found. They could not formally identify her with complete legal certainty. Story 53. I would say the vast majority of hauntings that cannot be explained by other reasons are just carbon monoxide poisoning. By a carbon monoxide detector, people. Story 54. Everybody interested should check out the podcast Skeptoid. It has over 700 episodes of rational explanations for every type of unsolved mystery or conspiracy theory. Story 55. Ghosts. People say they can feel a ghost, or they even saw a ghost out of the corner of their eye. Science has been able to help explain the cause, though. It is just infrasound. Story 56. Almost every supernatural sighting can be explained by gas leaks, carbon monoxide, poor ventilation, black mold, datura, or loud noises occurring at night that make sleep difficult. Reports of someone seeing ghosts and later dying are signs of poisoning caused by an old house. You do not see many ghost sightings around new construction. Story 57. Chris Kremers and Liz and Fern became overconfident while hiking, took a trail marked as not suitable for tourists, got lost, and died from a combination of injuries while trying to return and exposure to the elements. There was almost certainly no foul play, only bad luck. I suspect that someone found their belongings afterward and moved them. However, it could also have been a local who recognized that being found with the possessions of two missing tourists could cause serious trouble, and they wanted no part of it. Story 58. Every year or so, a disembodied foot washes ashore on the coast of British Columbia. For a long time, people have believed in a conspiracy theory about a serial killer. I studied criminology, and one of our teachers revealed the truth. The Pacific Ocean is vast. People die at sea frequently. Ankles are weak joints and shoes float. British Columbia has a long coastline. Many ocean currents lead to British Columbia. It is that simple. Story 59. As a big fan of cryptozoology, even though I recognize it is nonsense, here is a list of plausible explanations for famous cryptids. Bigfoot equals bears, probably walking on their hind legs or infected with mange. Loch Ness Monster equals leopard seal. They are huge, toothy, with big yellow eyes, and even have the whiskers some Nessie sightings describe. They are not common in the area, so one taking residence in Loch Ness could inspire a lot of folklore. Gray aliens equal barn owls. Jersey Devil equals sandhill crane. Chupacabra equals dogs, coyotes, or raccoons infected with mange and/or rabies. Giant squids are real. Story 60. The idea that Lee Harvey Oswald made an impossible shot is just ridiculous. It was about 90 yards on a target heading right towards him. That is point blank. Story 61. Those often quoted statistics about how many thousands of children go missing every year feed the conspiracy theories about pedophile cults and baby eating. This ignores the fact that the vast majority of them turn up alive and well within a day or so. Story 62. Rods, also known as skyfish, are supposed cryptids that people claim appear in photographs sometimes. They are just motion blur from bugs or birds flying across when the photo is taken. Story 63. The solution to the Bermuda Triangle mystery is that there is no mystery at all. The number of shipwrecks that occurred there is entirely proportional to the amount of traffic that passes through it. Story 64. DB. Cooper's parachute was found on the property of Richard McCoy Jr., who committed another robbery in the same manner, was caught, escaped from prison, and died in a shootout with police before the original case was solved. Story 65. The Bermuda Triangle has a normal number of ships lost considering the large volume of ships that pass through the area. It is a major thoroughfare. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.